the options have the same places, so you'll be able to follow this tutorial through even if you are using Windows and have created a virtual machine, for the most part anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and close it now. I will uninstall it here because it's completely pointless for the time being. But in any case, I hope that this was helpful to all the Windows users out there, because let's face it, a lot of people do use Windows. However, for pen testing purposes, for ethical hacking, Windows is not the best operating system to use out there, primarily because it's a lot harder to become anonymous with Windows, to anonymize yourself, and furthermore, most of the pen testing hacking tools were actually designed for Unix Linux like environments for to work in combination with their terminals. However, the choice of the operating system is completely up to you. I will be working with Fedora, Linux, and I will most likely be using this Windows machine as some sort of a victim which we will be attacking and exploiting. Anyway, I bid you all farewell, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will continue with the installation of Kali Linux within a virtual environment. You might have noticed that I have two screens on which it is written Kali Linux, and they are exactly the same, except one has a bigger font and a zoomed in picture, so to say. So over here on the left side, this is my virtual machine, the window that I'm moving now. This is the actual virtual machine. And the window on the right side, that is just a zooming in app that I have installed in order for you to be able to better see what I am about to show you here, primarily because I don't have guest editions installed on the virtual machine, and you cannot install them until you actually install the operating system first. Therefore, I can't zoom in anything. I cannot perform any operations of a kind, and you can see that the font on the left side is rather small and a bit difficult to see. Therefore, I will perform the work there on the left side, and you can monitor what I am doing on the right. There is no difference between left and right in terms of actions, only in terms of font size. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down to install, press enter, that is what we want, and the installation procedure is underway. By the way, if you boot into live version, the password for the default password for root is just root in reverse, so TOOR. Just a bit of a brief mention there, a bit of extra info that I wanted to throw in there, might come in handy from time to time. Anyway, pick whatever language is suitable for you. You can also pick the uppermost option where it says C, no localization. So if you want a greater degree of anonymity or something of a kind, you can even pick that. But for the sake of this tutorial, there really isn't any need. And even if you do pick a language, I mean, if a lot of people pick English. So that will not footprint you or anything of a kind. So just press enter, and here you can actually choose a country, territory, or area. Well, I don't know, you can choose whatever you want here. I'm just gonna go ahead and click UK because it immediately offers me a British keyboard that I use. So that's very nice in terms of settings. But again, you could have chosen no localization, and this you would not be asked any of these things. Well, for keyboard you probably would, but for the country, area, or anything of a kind, you would not. In any case, even if you don't pick the right one here, it doesn't matter. Later on, after the installation, you can configure it any way you like. But it's very nice to do it straight away, saves a bit of work later on. Anyway, the installation is now underway. I'm just gonna unbind my mouse. Seems to get stuck in a loop there. Basically, you bind and unbind your keys by simply pressing the right control key. That is how you control the mouse. Oops. Just move this a bit so you can see it a bit better. Expand. Nope. There we go. Anyway, there's some auto configuration going on now. Nothing really noteworthy, so to say. Let me just change this a bit. There we go. And you can pick a host name here, unless you have some sort of specific preferences, and you actually have a registered host name or something of a kind, which you do not want to use here, by the way. You can just leave it as default. You can type in you can leave Kali, or you can actually write whatever you want your computer to be called. So I'm just gonna leave it. I'm just gonna leave it default, but you can, as I said, you can write whatever you wish to write there, no problems. So let's just go overhead on to the continue. By the way, you don't have a mouse option here while you're doing this installation. So pressing tab switches between fields and options. If you press space, that means you're marking the field, and tab means switching fields. So you use tab, space, and enter to actually call a function to execute something. In this case, I'm just going to say continue. Here you can type in your domain name. No, I do not want the domain name at this time. Keep in mind that you can configure this later on as well, should there be a need for it. Just click on continue or hit enter. Now, root password, I would suggest picking something ridiculously complex and complicated. And a lot of people worry that they won't remember their passwords if they're long and complicated or something of a kind. But assign a certain logic to your password, something that reflects the way you think, and then the password can gain on length, and you can still manage to remember it. So for example, you can insert a certain word that you use or that you're attached to or something like that, something that you like, but you don't need to type the word, you don't need to spell the word correctly in English language. Rather, instead you can spell it incorrectly and then add, I don't know, like exclamation marks, question marks, greater than signs, lesser than signs, at sign, and so on and so forth. But figure something that reflects your logic, your way of thinking, and make sure that it is above 8 characters. Like, above 8 characters is a must-have. It needs to contain capital letters, a few of them, not just one. You need also a different form of signs. You cannot use just one sign. That's not a good idea. You need to use like 3 or 4 of them in a mixture. The more the better, and don't just type in a word in English language and then type in numbers and then type in signs. So you are already assigning a very strict order, so any brute forcing attack will go much easier if you do something like that. Rather, instead, try to have a mixture. Try to randomize the position of the types of characters that you're going to put in to your password. Give some thought to this. Don't just type in something at random. Don't just type in something easy here. Just give some thought to it. For the time being, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use one of the dumbest passwords possible. I'm going to type in test. That's going to be the password of this virtual machine, and I'm going to hit the continue button. But as it's going to ask you to verify it by forcing you to re-enter it, and there we go, it's going. But once again, I emphasize, use a strong password above 8 characters plus, with characters and capital letters as well. So now we have partitioning methods, and if this was my main machine, if this was my host machine, I would definitely do this manually. I would want my partitions to be configured in a certain way, but since this is a virtual machine, I'm just gonna go ahead and say guided use entire disk. It doesn't matter to me as there is only one partition anyway, and it's 138 gigs. It's pretty much better like this, as we don't really have any legit need for anything of a kind unless we wanted to set some sort of encryption or something of a kind. Press enter. All files in one partition, recommended for new users. Sure, we can do that. You can separate home partition, you can separate all of these partitions. For example, this is something that I did on my host machine. You have a lot of things that are separate, and my main drives are also fully encrypted. So it would it would even if I lost my laptop or it got stolen, it would be really difficult to access pretty much anything. Even the BIOS is locked, so you can't even reinstall it. You would literally have to open up the laptop, take the BIOS battery out, which is underneath which is underneath my main processor, and you're more likely to basically permanently damage the motherboard than you are to actually remove and put back that battery in order to reset the BIOS. It would, that's one of the very nice fail safes for devices, especially for compact laptops. But in this case, we don't need any of that, primarily because such configuration and such things are done on the host machine. You encrypt your partitions there, you lock the BIOS there, and so on and so forth. While on the other hand, with virtual machines, there's no need to do anything of a kind, primarily because the host machines are the fail-safe. If that fails, everything else will fail. So you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to add those unnecessary layers, I would say, primarily because they're going to slow you down in the greater scheme of things. So press enter, finish partitioning, and write changes to disk. Before I do that, let me just go ahead and explain our partitioning scheme here, or partitioning layout here. So you have primary hash 1 primary 126.5 gigabytes space f space ext4 space slash. Now all these things have a meaning, but what you need to know is that, like in Windows, you have NTFS partitions. In Linux, you have ext4 partitions. They are a bit faster. That's one thing that goes in the favor of Linux. And you also, during the partitioning during the partitioning of the disk with a Linux system, there is only one partition which is a must-have, which is an absolute requirement, and that is this first partition that I have selected. Its marcation is just slash. That is the root partition, and you always need to configure it. Always. Without it, manual partitioning will not work. You will get error messages saying that you must specify a root partition. Down below, we have swap. Swap is basically a fail-safe method. So when you run out of RAM memory, you basically tell your system, okay, you can have this portion of the hard drive and you can use it as RAM, which functions in a very slow manner, but it will prevent your machine from crashing. Usually swap partitions are configured to the they are the double size of your RAM. My RAM is 8 gigabytes, but here by default the computer has assigned 4 because this is a virtual machine, and if you remember at the beginning I have assigned 2 gigabytes of RAM to this virtual machine, so it has just multiplied it by 2. It wasn't exactly 2, it was just above 2, and it has multiplied it by 2, so I get 4.3 gigabytes of swap space. Now, on most of the modern systems, on most of the modern computers, you will not require swap partitions. Even though if you don't make it, you'll get a warning, but rare are the cases when you will need a swap partition, when you will waste all 8 gigabytes of RAM or something of a kind. I mean, it happens to me from time to time, but usually if it happens, there's something wrong with the system. I don't want it to continue consuming resources. I want it to stop there. Anyway, now that you know that what some of these things, what some of the options here mean, you have marcation for the disk here. It's SDA, but we'll get into that later as we configure the system. So you also have some other options here. It says configure encrypted volumes, configure logical volume manager, LVM, configure RAID, and you can go back to guided partitioning. So these are all very nice options that come for free And you might think, oh, well, that's no big deal or something of a kind. But believe me when I tell you these things in proprietary operating systems, they cost a lot of money. While here, they are free and generally work better. What we will be interested today will not be RAID because we don't actually need it. You can configure encrypted volumes as well. I will demonstrate at a later time encryption methods. You don't need to encrypt your volumes in a virtual machine, but you can encrypt certain files or folders if you don't want to grant access to them. However, my hard drives here on my host machine are encrypted, so I am pretty safe in that regard. Then I'm just going to go ahead now to the bottom, press enter, and finish partitioning and write changes to disk. Excellent. So now, oops, let me just move this a little bit so you can see it. Basically, it is asking me for a confirmation. So if you continue, the changes listed below will be written to disks. Otherwise, you will be able to make further changes manually. Now, it is informing me of the changes to be made and telling me basically that all the information will be lost should there be anything there. And you can see that by default it is set to no, so that you don't press enter by mistake and erase pretty much all the data on your disks, because this installation, this ISO file that you're installing, it does not know that it is being installed on a virtual machine on which nothing pretty much exists and there is nothing to be lost. So write changes to disks, yes. Go ahead and continue with the procedure. It is now, the installation process is now underway, and this is gonna take a while, I can tell you that much. So while this is going on, I just want to go ahead and pause the video here and finish this tutorial. In the next tutorial, once the installation is complete, I will actually get into Kali, start configuring it, and introduce you to its interface. In any case, I bid you farewell, and I hope to see you all in the next tutorial. Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial. I have Kali Linux machine here running. I have left the installation process in the last tutorial because it was quite frankly pointless to just sit and wait for it to finish, primarily because Kali Linux installation, it tends to be a bit longer than the installation of other Linux operating systems, primarily because of the prepackaged tools that come with it. However, there were a few screenshots that I have made that some of the options that you were asked while the installation process was going on. So there were just 3 of them. I'm just gonna go ahead and open them up here. So the first one that happened was that I was asked, do you want to use a network mirror to supplement the software that is included on the CD-ROM? This may also make this may also make newer versions of software available. I said no because I'm gonna do an update as soon as I finish the installation process and as soon as I configure everything in the proper way. That's basic. The update is the part of the configuration that I'm going to do, so it doesn't matter. No, I do not want to use any mirrors or anything of a kind. I'm just going to say no and go ahead and proceed with the installation. So next up is the grub. So grub bootloader, it is asking me, do you want to install grub bootloader to the master boot records? Yes, I do. Just click on it, as this is the only operating system on this machine, on this computer. There's nothing that I can mess up by installing the grub bootloader to the master boot records of the first hard drive, as it is stated here in the instructions. You can use the grub bootloader in order to configure multiple dual boots, or I don't know, you can boot 3, 4, 5 operating systems, as many as you like, as many as your hardware can support. Not at the same time, of course, but at boot time you will be prompted and asked, which operating system do you wish to boot? That's also one of the options that you can have with grub. But aside from that, Just click yes there, and there's a final one. It simply states that the installation is complete, and if you have used a CD to complete this installation or a USB or something of a kind, you will need to remove that media and reboot the system in order for all of this to function. So that would be it. I was asked those three very simple questions. You have the answers here. Just go through them. It will not make a difference in the final account of things. Just going to go ahead and close this, and now I'm going to go ahead and log into my Kali Linux virtual machine. So the username is, this is actually one of the rare occasions. Actually, this is pretty much the only occasions where I log into GUI with root. But as you can see, as you will soon realize, in Kali Linux, everybody just logs in with root, primarily because you are not using Kali Linux to browse the web or something like that. You are usually using it 99% of time to perform some sort of an attack, and for all of those tools, you need to be pretty much for all of those tools, you need to be a root user or have root privileges. There's most of the time there's no point to have any other users on a Kali Linux distro. So type in root, press enter, password was test, press enter, yours is whatever you appointed it to be. Of course, if it's a virtual machine, you don't need to worry that much, but if it's your main machine or something like that, and Kali is generally not recommended to be your main desktop machine, that's not a good idea. Rather run it as a virtual machine. Okay, so first I need to do a few things like updates in order for me to be able to install VirtualBox guest editions so that we may use full screen and that we may use share clipboard and so on and so forth. Just go ahead and change this, open up my terminal, set the view. This is non-technical stuff. This you can do. This you can configure any way you like. I'm just zooming it in for the purposes of this tutorial so that you may see it better. But before we can do updates, before we can do anything, we must verify that we have connectivity to the internet. So ping, I don't know, yahoo.com. There we go. Nothing is happening. So I cannot ping yahoo.com, meaning that I don't have exit to the external network. I cannot access the internet. That's a pretty big problem because pretty much whatever we do, we will need internet for it, internet connectivity for it, in order to download packets from the repositories, to perform updates, and to conduct scans, possible scans, and so on and so forth. So just go ahead and click on devices, find network settings, and here you can see it's set by default. It will be set to NAT, but you don't want the NAT. You want bridged adapter, and you want to choose your adapter here. Mine is P8P1. See what yours is, and click Allow VMS, virtual machines. So okay, if you don't know what the adapter on your machine is and you are using a Linux system, just go ahead, open up your terminal, and type in ifconfig. Here you will be able to see a listing of adapters that you have. So you have LO, which is loopback, you have P8P1, which is my Ethernet connection. This is for some virtual machines as well. And I have VLP2S0, which is my wireless interface. So I know that for a fact that I'm using P8P1 primarily because my network manager tells me that I am. You see, connected to P8P1. This is also a better way of actually checking what you are connected to, which adapter you are using. So just open up your network manager in the upper right corner and look at P8P1. It says connected. Your network manager's position can vary depending on how you've configured your system. By default, it will be in bottom right corner, but that is easy enough to find either way. Let's just go ahead and close this terminal. Now that we know Now that we have actually configured our network, have we? Yes, we have. But still, I'm pretty sure I won't have internet connectivity. Let me just try ping again, and you see it is simply not working. So there is a problem once again. So let's just go ahead and check the Kali Linux Network Manager, and it says wired network but device not managed. that can be a problem, and that is a general problem which you will face with wired interfaces pretty much all the time. There's a relatively easy fix to it. You just navigate over in the terminal, you type in cd, which stands for change directory, to etc network manager. Let's see what's in it. Excellent. We have network manager config.conf. I'm going to go ahead and type in nano, which is the text editor that I'm going to be using, and then type in networkmanager.conf. Press enter. There we go. It opens up the configuration file. You do need to be root in order to make any changes here. It says main plugins, if up down, key file, if up down, managed equals false. So where it says false, just delete this and type in true. Control O to save, press enter, Control X to exit. Now we need to actually restart our network manager. So just go ahead and type in service network. There we go. Network manager restart. Stopping and starting. Excellent. Connection established. You are now connected to if up down ETH0. Let's check the connectivity. So ping yahoo.com. Excellent. So now we have internet connectivity, and pay attention to these steps here. They're quite important, not so much for the ethical hacking part as they are to actually setting up the environment, because setting up the environment itself can be troublesome. You can encounter multiple problems, bugs, etc., and then instead of having to go from one forum to the other trying to find the solution, you can just go through this tutorial. Just pay a bit of attention, and I will show you pretty much how to resolve pretty much all the issues that you might encounter, because I myself am doing I have done a fresh install here, and I would be encountering the same problems that anybody else would, and I would like to go over them. Because more likely than not, if you are performing a virtual machine installation, you will encounter similar problems as I have. Although, should you encounter any other problems, please feel free to pose questions, and I will be more than happy to provide any answers that I can. So let's just go ahead and clear the screen. And now that we have internet connectivity, I would like to perform some updates which are necessary. Believe me, you need to perform regular updates of the system, because you will find that certain things will not work after a while. So let me just change the directory, clear the screen again, type in app-get update. So I could do this with one command in Fedora, but here I'm going to need two of them. So it's picking up things from the repositories. Excellent. Now I need to type in app-get upgrade. Press, and you see it says after this operation 73 megabytes of additional disk space will be used. This is this last sentence here that I am marking. And that is quite a bit in terms of updates. I mean, look at all the packages. These are all the packages that are to be updated. List goes on and on. Well, there we go. It starts from here and it doesn't end anytime soon. It goes all the way down. So anyway, just type in yes. You don't actually need to type in capital Y. You can just type in Y, press enter, and the update process will start. Now, depending on your internet connection, this might take shorter or longer amounts of time. I will end this tutorial here until the updates actually finish, because I don't want to be standing here in front of the screen. But in any case, these updates will finish until the end. You're not going to be posed any questions at a certain point of time during the update process. You might be notified of some things. A screen might pop with some text. That's perfectly fine. Just you can read through it and then close it. Those are README files specifying the characteristics of certain packages and what has been upgraded. But don't go about just reading it there. You can close it later on. If you wish, you can do further exploration and actually discover what each of these packages contains. In any case, we will continue this process in the follow-up tutorial. Until then, I bid you all farewell. Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will continue from where I left off in the previous one. Now, if you remember, we issued app-get update and app-get upgrade commands. That took a while to finish and process. I was prompted once. I was given a README file in regards to wget program, wget packet, and the way you go about, the way you handle it is you press Q to exit. You do not close the terminal and terminate the updates. Rather, instead, you just press Q to exit the README file, and the update process will continue, no problems. So today we need to configure the sources list. Those are the list of repositories from which your Linux distro actually pulls various packets